So let's talk about the new buzzword. It's everywhere. Shadow, shadow work. I find it as the new companion word for ego. Sometimes people will go, they'll either say ego or they'll say shadow, where it was only all about ego when people were talking about things, generally other people. They now sometimes go, oh, they're in their shadow. But a bit like the companion word ego, most people don't understand it. They don't understand the full aspect of it and why it presents, when they're in it, the triggers, all that type of thing. So I thought we would just take a few moments to touch on it. And as I said, we're just going to touch on it. So shadow is that aspect of self that is that lower frequency. When we respond in a way that is not ideal. Maybe we project, which is another word that is thrown around all the time and overused and used wrongly. But don't get me started on that. That's for another time. But whether we are coming out of ourselves in a particular way that's not great. Maybe we, instead of coming out, someone has come at us with a particular feeling, emotions, words, and we have gone inward and we've gone into our head and we're now having negative self-talk. Maybe we're triggered by particular things that upset us or get us to respond in a particular way. They're all shadow aspects of ourself. If we have worked on our shadow self, we still go into those because we're human. I'm sorry, unless you have that energy of, divine love, and in that place of, the closest thing that I know of, that I have seen, is someone that is a pretty fantastic monk. They're the closest thing I find here that is like that. When I say here, I mean this earthly plane. Most of us don't. Most of us flip from shadow to evolved to shadow to evolved. It's just the way we are. We're human. It's part of our lessons. It's what we came here to learn. So if we have done some shadow work and we've sat with ourselves and we understand what triggers us, why it triggers us, and what we get out of it, we can identify when we go in it. Someone that's done their shadow work, or even working on it, when they go to that negative frequency, when they go into their head and they start, feeling bad, thinking bad things, all that kind of thing, if you've done your work, you'll know straight away you're in it. You'll understand why you're there. So you'll understand what triggered you. You'll understand why it triggered you. You'll go back to that place where maybe a self-belief was placed into you from someone as a child. Maybe you had an experience that created some beliefs in you that aren't accurate, that bring stuff up in you. All these type of things trigger our shadow. But when you've done your work, you'll identify, you'll know why you're there, and you'll understand why you go there. And when I say understand, I actually mean what you get out of it when you go there. Because if you didn't get something out of it, you wouldn't go there. You just wouldn't. So that's the difference between someone that has done shadow work and not. They clearly identify when they're there, why they're there, how they got there, what they're getting out of it. Someone that hasn't done any shadow work just goes there, goes into that energy, goes into that space, spends however long they need to in there until they drag themselves out. Sometimes people never drag themselves out, and sometimes people do. There is a misconception, misbelief, wrong teachings, that if you've done your shadow work, you never go into shadow. I'm sorry, I don't believe that at all. And the reason why I don't believe that is because the universe has duality. Where there is light, there is dark. There must be balance. We are human. We have that balance. We can never get rid of that aspect of personality. And the reference that reminds me of this is when we look at our natal chart for astrology. For anyone that is an astrologer in this group, you'll understand that our chart, each planet in our chart has 3 aspects to it. It'll have primitive, it will have adaptive, and it will have evolving. Sorry about my voice. It will have evolving. We, at best case scenario, will move from adaptive to evolving, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. We never stay totally in evolving. We will move backwards and forwards. And if we've done no work on ourselves, then we spend a lot of time in primitive. It's a similar kind of thing with our shadow. Now, sorry about my throat. So we need to understand why we go into this, what triggers us. We need to spend some time exploring it. The best way to do that is when you find that you go into those emotions, you do those responses without thinking, you haven't paused, you haven't sat with things when people have upset you, situations have upset you, you've just lashed out. If you haven't lashed out, you've gone within and you're feeling anger, you're feeling pain, you're hurt. Okay, all those type of things is that shadow aspect of self. I invite you to, instead of responding, whether it be internally or externally, instead of doing that, I want you to pause. The pause is critical. And then, I want you to explore it. And you can explore it by journaling. You can explore it by just sitting silently and unpicking it internally. What happened? Why did that situation or person or words trigger you, upset you, create a negative response within you? What were they? What were those words, those actions? Why did that person do that to you? Maybe it's one particular person that just knows how to push your buttons. What are those buttons? Identify what those buttons are. Step 1 is to do that. Now, the harder part is step 2, where we go and think about and explore and unpick and spend a lot of time finding when that first time that button was pushed. What occurred in your childhood, teenage years, early adulthood, that put a belief in you about that trigger? What was that? Understand that. That is critical. We have to go back to that point when it first happened, when something first was placed into your consciousness or subconsciousness that now you haven't healed and you're bringing forward, and now you're responding. Takes some time, definitely does. Takes commitment, 100%. But when we work these things out, these people are still going to do this stuff to you. They're still going to trigger you. They're still going to say the words. It's still going to come into your world. But when you know what the triggers are, or who the triggers are, the situation, the words, whatever it is, and you pause, you can still go into the shadow, because guaranteed we still do. I do it too. I understand why I do it. I understand why I've gone there. And I know when I'm there. So when we go to that place, pause, please. Explore it. And it's a way of understanding yourself more. And then when we can understand our triggers, depending on what they are, we can reset them if we want to. And we can reset them by reprogramming beliefs within ourselves. Won't stop you still going there. You can still go there, but it won't impact you. You won't get hurt. You won't get upset. You won't respond. The other thing to be mindful of, and this is where the misinformation is around shadow work. If you've done your shadow work and you still go into shadow for whatever reason, but you're not responding, you're not getting hurt, you know when you're there, only you know when you're there, and only you know if you've done your shadow work or not. It's like ego. People say, oh, they're in ego. It's a bit like when they go, oh, they haven't done their shadow work. You'll know if you've done your shadow work or not. So I invite you and I challenge you to stop letting others determine if you're in ego or if you've done your shadow work, and to not to do it to anyone else either, because they know what's in their heart. They know how they feel, just like you know how you feel and what's in your heart and whether you've done your work or not. Because judging is part of ego. So if you judge others if they've done their shadow work, or someone is doing it to you, they're actually representing and displaying that behavior. And you'll know, as I said, you'll know based on how you feel if you are in shadow or not, and you'll know if you have done your work or not, or maybe you're still working on it, because at the end of the day, I truly believe, unless you're at that energy, as I said, that monk type energy, it's the only thing I can come up with, we will all go into it from time to time. It's just part of our journey. It's part of learning our lessons to work our way through this. But it is such a cliche word now. It's thrown around all the time. It's up there with like projection, ego, and now shadow. They're words that people use all the time and label people with them, and it's really misunderstood. So I just wanted to take a few moments to just explore this concept and let you now start seeing when you're going into it what it is, when you're coming out of it. Take some time to acknowledge when you go into it, develop some practices through journaling, sitting with yourself, meditating, those type of practices that we use for lots of other things, and create a practice where you can start working on your soul and knowing when you go into this space, why, what triggers you, that type of thing. So I'm going to leave that with you. Explore it, spend some time, and remember, don't let anyone else decide what's going on in your heart and label it. You know when you've done the work, and you know when you haven't, and you know when you're in that energy, and you know when you're not. So I'm going to leave that with you. Have a wonderful day, and we'll connect soon.